Thank you, universe. Say it out loud right now the way you'd normally say it, and then notice something most people never bother to check, whether your body actually believes a single word of it, or whether it's quietly still bracing, still waiting, still hoping the sentence itself will be the thing that finally makes the money show up. If it's the second one, that sentence is one of the most expensive things you'll say today. Not because gratitude is wrong, gratitude isn't the problem, but because of what's actually happening underneath it when it's said from lack instead of from fact. This exact phrase, or some close variation of it, shows up everywhere in this space, printed across sunrise photos, captioned under gratitude journal videos, whispered at the end of guided meditations, stitched onto phone wallpapers sold specifically to manifestation audiences. It's become so common that almost nobody stops to examine it. The same way nobody examines a phrase they've heard 1,000 times, it simply gets absorbed as obviously true, obviously helpful, obviously part of doing the work correctly. That familiarity is exactly why it's worth examining closely today, precisely because it's repeated so often by so many people with so little scrutiny. This is going to be an uncomfortable video for anyone who's built an entire manifestation practice around gratitude journals, grateful affirmations, thanking the universe in advance for money that hasn't arrived. Not because the impulse is foolish, it isn't. Gratitude genuinely is one of the most powerful states available to a human nervous system. The problem is timing, and almost nobody teaching this online tells you the timing matters more than the words themselves. Said at the wrong moment, from the wrong internal position, gratitude doesn't accelerate anything. It quietly confirms the exact lack it's pretending to thank its way out of. Neville Goddard was specific about this in a way modern manifestation culture has almost entirely lost. He taught giving thanks as an act that follows the assumption of the wish fulfilled, not one that precedes it or substitutes for it. Thanksgiving, in his teaching, is the natural, calm response of someone who already, internally, considers the thing done. It is not a technique you perform repeatedly, anxiously, hoping the repetition itself will eventually produce the fact. Somewhere between his teaching and the version currently sold across social media, gratitude got repositioned from a confirmation into a request, dressed up in warmer language, and that repositioning is exactly what's costing people money, time, and years of their life without them ever noticing the mechanism. Here's the actual mechanism, stripped of anything mystical. Your nervous system does not process the literal words of a sentence the way your conscious mind does. It processes the underlying state generating the sentence. Thank you, said by someone who has genuinely already received something, carries an entirely different internal signature than thank you, said by someone who wants something and is hoping gratitude will summon it. The words can be identical. The state underneath them is not, and your subconscious, the part of you actually responsible for what gets assumed and eventually outpictured, reads the state, not the vocabulary. This is why so many people can journal gratitude every single morning for months. Thank you for the money. Thank you for the abundance. Thank you, universe, for taking care of me. And watch their financial situation stay exactly where it was, sometimes get worse. They assumed the words were doing the work. The words were never doing the work. The state underneath the words was doing the work, and if that state is actually want, hope, need, dressed in grateful language, the subconscious receives want, hope, need, the same three states it would receive from an openly desperate affirmation, just wearing a nicer outfit. Picture the actual morning routine. Coffee, journal open, and you write, I am so grateful for the abundance flowing into my life. Thank you, universe, for taking care of my bills. Then you close the journal, and within the same 10 minutes, open your banking app to check the exact number you were just supposedly at peace about. That single sequence tells you everything. If real gratitude had actually landed, checking wouldn't carry the same charge it did before. There'd be nothing urgent left to verify. The fact that the check happens immediately afterward, driven by the same anxious curiosity that existed before you wrote a single grateful word, reveals that the gratitude never actually replaced the underlying want. It just sat on top of it for the length of a journal entry. This is worth sitting with because it's not a rare pattern. It's close to the default for how this practice gets taught. Someone films a morning routine video, grateful journaling, soft lighting, a calm voice reading 3 things they're thankful for, and it looks and even feels in the moment like a genuine shift. But the tell was never in the journal. It was in what happened 5 minutes later. Whether the underlying need to check, to verify, to confirm the words worked, was still fully intact. Most of the time it was, quietly, the entire time, underneath a very sincere-sounding paragraph of gratitude. Think about what genuine thanks actually requires as a precondition in any other context in your life. You don't thank someone for a gift you haven't received yet. Not really, not in the full sense of the word. If you did, and the gift never came, you'd feel foolish, embarrassed, exposed, because thanking implies the transaction already happened. That exposed, slightly foolish feeling, the one you'd feel thanking someone prematurely for something that might not come, is exactly the feeling most people are suppressing every time they thank the universe for money that currently shows no evidence of existing. They're not admitting that feeling consciously, but the nervous system isn't fooled by what you refuse to admit consciously. It responds to what's actually present underneath, and what's actually present most of the time in premature gratitude is a very quiet, very well-disguised version of begging. Begging doesn't stop being begging just because it's phrased as appreciation. Please let this work and thank you in advance just in case is still structurally a request, wrapped in the vocabulary of a done deal. The nervous system isn't tracking your vocabulary choices. It's tracking whether the underlying transaction has actually, internally, occurred. If it hasn't, if some part of you is still checking, still hoping, still needing the gratitude to produce a result rather than confirm one, you are asking in the exact same begging tone as someone directly pleading for money, just using softer, more spiritually acceptable words to do it. There's a second, quieter cost buried in this specific phrase, thank you, universe, and it has nothing to do with timing. It's the framing itself. Notice the structure of the sentence. It positions the universe as a separate, external entity, something outside you, something with its own will, its own schedule, its own decision about whether to grant your request, that you now need to appease, flatter, or thank into compliance, the same way you might thank a boss you're hoping will approve a raise or a landlord you're hoping won't raise the rent. Neville taught something almost the opposite of this, repeatedly, directly. The outer world, everything you'd casually call the universe, is not a separate power sitting in judgment of your requests. It's the outpicturing of your own consciousness, your own assumed states, projected outward and experienced as if external. When he said the world is yourself pushed out, he wasn't offering a poetic metaphor. He was describing the actual mechanism. The imagination operating within you is the entire creative power at work, not a separate cosmic committee reviewing your gratitude submissions before issuing a verdict. This matters enormously for the specific phrase we're examining, because every time you thank a separate universe for something you don't yet have, you're quietly reinforcing the belief that the power to produce this outcome lives outside you, in something else's hands, something you must please rather than something you already are. That's not a small philosophical technicality. It's the entire difference between operating from cause and operating from effect. Someone thanking an external universe, hoping it grants the request, is stationed firmly in the position of effect, waiting on a decision made elsewhere. Someone who understands imagination as the actual operant power doesn't need to flatter anything external, because there's no external authority to flatter. There's only the state currently being assumed, and the outpicturing of that state is already structurally guaranteed to follow. Picture two people side by side, both saying a version of thank you about money. The first says it toward an external universe, positioned somewhere out there, deciding, judging, choosing whether today is the day it grants the request. Watch what this does to posture, to tone, to the actual felt experience of saying it. There's a slight upward, outward quality to it, an appeal, even when the words are warm. This person, without realizing it, has placed themselves in the position of a subject petitioning a ruler, however gently phrased the petition might be. The second person says a nearly identical sentence, but the internal orientation is completely different. Thanks is felt as a private, internal acknowledgement of a state already assumed, directed at nothing external at all, the way you might quietly register satisfaction alone in a room. No appeal, no petition, no separate judge whose mood needs managing. This person isn't being arrogant or claiming to be their own god in some grandiose, attention-seeking way. They've simply stopped relating to their own creative power as though it lives somewhere else, in a separate entity that must first be convinced. The practical difference between these two people shows up exactly where you'd expect, in how quickly and how often the first person needs to repeat the ritual to feel like it's working, and how rarely the second person needs to perform any ritual at all because there's no external approval being sought in the first place. Think of how you already treat a skill you're genuinely good at, driving a familiar route, cooking a dish you've made 100 times. You don't send up a request and wait for approval before trusting you can do it. You just do it, calmly, because the ability is already yours, already settled. Nothing left to confirm. That's the exact posture missing from thanking a separate universe, and the exact posture available the moment you stop treating your own state as something that needs somebody else's sign-off first. Notice, too, that people who've held real financial ease for a long time almost never perform gratitude the way it's taught in this culture. They don't journal 3 things they're thankful for about money every morning. They don't thank a separate universe out loud for abundance, not because they're ungrateful, but because there's nothing left in them still checking, still needing confirmation, still relating to money as a request that might be denied. When gratitude does show up for them, it's rare, brief, and directed at nothing in particular. A quiet, private moment noticing something good, not a scheduled ritual performed daily to manage an underlying anxiety about whether enough is coming. This is worth noticing precisely because the entire gratitude journaling culture markets itself as something wealthy, successful, high-vibration people supposedly do constantly, when the opposite is closer to the truth. Constant, effortful gratitude about money is far more common in people still assuming lack than in people who've actually settled into abundance as their baseline. The daily ritual is often itself quiet evidence of the very thing it's trying to talk itself out of. This doesn't mean gratitude is a red flag whenever it appears. It means compulsive, repeated, effortful gratitude specifically about something you don't yet have is worth examining honestly, instead of assuming it's automatically doing you good simply because it feels positive while you're doing it. Let's talk about why the word expensive in the title of this video isn't an exaggeration for effect. Every single day spent thanking a separate universe from a position of lack is a day spent rehearsing exactly the identity you're trying to leave, want, hope, need, externalized power, effect instead of cause, just wrapped in pleasant, grateful-sounding language that makes the rehearsal feel productive instead of counterproductive. That rehearsal has a real measurable cost, paid in the only currency that actually matters here, time. Every month spent performing gratitude from lack is a month the actual identity shift didn't happen, because the attention and repetition that could have gone toward genuinely assuming the wish fulfilled instead went toward a more comfortable, more socially acceptable version of the exact same begging you were trying to escape. Multiply that by however many months or years someone's been doing this, and the actual cost becomes concrete, not abstract. It's the raise not asked for because the identity never shifted. It's the opportunity not taken because the underlying assumption of lack was quietly being reinforced every morning in a gratitude journal that felt like progress. It's the exact same financial position 1 to 5 years later, defended the entire time by a practice that looked, felt, and sounded like it should have been working. If any of this landed, comment the phrase you've caught yourself saying the most. Thank you, universe, I'm so grateful for the money that's coming. Or whatever version you use. I want to see exactly which phrase is quietly doing this to the most people watching. That's the problem, laid out plainly. In the next part, we go through exactly how to tell the difference between gratitude that's genuinely working and gratitude that's secretly begging, and the specific way to use Thanksgiving the way Neville actually taught it, so it starts confirming your new identity instead of quietly rehearsing the old one. Here's how you actually tell the difference, because both versions can sound identical out loud, and the only reliable place to check is inside your own body, not your vocabulary. Say your gratitude statement right now, whatever version you normally use, and pay attention to 2 specific things. First, is there any grasping quality to it? Any sense of needing this statement to work? Any quiet checking to see if it's landing correctly? Second, do you feel any urge to repeat it immediately again and then again, as if one round wasn't quite convincing enough? Both of those are tells of begging dressed as thanks. Genuine thanksgiving, the kind Neville actually taught, doesn't grasp and doesn't need repetition to feel true. because it's a response to something already settled internally, not an attempt to settle something that still feels unsettled. Try a second, more specific test. Think of the exact dollar figure you've been hoping for and say thank you for that specific number out loud right now. Notice whether the number itself produces a small flinch, a slight internal recoil, a sense of that's a lot. Could that really happen underneath the grateful tone? That flinch, however faint, is the tell of a gap between the number and your currently assumed identity. A gap gratitude alone, repeated endlessly, cannot close, because gratitude was never designed to close gaps, only to confirm that a gap has already been closed by an assumption made elsewhere, deliberately, in a relaxed state through a specific felt scene. If there's no flinch at all, if the number lands as flatly certain as stating your own birthday, that's the actual marker of a settled assumption, and Thanksgiving said from that specific place is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Most people, tested this way for the first time, are surprised by how much flinch is actually present underneath a practice they'd have described 5 minutes earlier as feeling completely positive and grateful. Compare this to how you naturally thank someone for something completely certain, ordinary, already done. If a friend hands you back money they borrowed, you say thank you once briefly and move on. You don't repeat it 5 times. You don't grasp at the sentence hoping it produces the repayment. Because the repayment already happened, the thanks is simply the natural social close to a completed transaction. That relaxed, brief, certain quality is exactly what Thanksgiving is supposed to feel like when it's actually working, and its complete absence, the grasping, the repetition, the quiet hoping, is exactly what tells you it's currently functioning as disguised begging instead. Some of you are going to object here that your gratitude isn't grasping at all. It's calm, genuine. You're honestly thankful for your health, your family, small, everyday things, and none of it feels like begging. Yet your financial situation still hasn't moved. This is a different and much simpler issue than the one we've been discussing. General gratitude for things already fully present in your life, health, relationships, small daily comforts, is genuine, and it's good for you in every ordinary sense, but it isn't doing anything specific for your finances, because assumption is domain-specific. Being settled and grateful about your health doesn't automatically install a settled, wealthy assumption about money. The same way being confident in your career doesn't automatically make you confident in a relationship. Each domain runs on its own accumulated evidence and its own currently assumed state. If your genuine, non-grasping gratitude has been aimed entirely at things unrelated to money, that gratitude was never going to move your financial identity, not because it was fake or badly performed, but because it was never actually addressed to the specific area that needed a new assumption installed. This is good news. In a strange way, it means your capacity for real, ungrasping Thanksgiving already works fine. You've simply never pointed it specifically at a felt scene of the financial identity you're trying to install, the way we're about to describe. The correct use of Thanksgiving starts after you've done the actual work of assuming the wish fulfilled, not as a replacement for that work. Choose a specific scene, the same way we've discussed in other videos on this channel. Small, sensory, believable, implying the wish already fulfilled. Occupy that scene briefly, in a relaxed state, feeling it as though it's already true. Only then does Thanksgiving enter, as the natural close of that imagined scene, the same brief, certain thanks you'd give for something completely settled, not a separate ritual performed from your current, unchanged circumstances. In practice, this looks like feeling the specific scene, the calm bank balance, the relieved conversation, the settled feeling of a resolved situation, and then, still inside that felt scene, saying thank you the way you'd say it for something that unquestionably already happened, once, briefly, without needing to convince yourself further. Not thank you, universe, for the money that's coming. Thank you simply the way you'd thank someone for money already in your hand. The difference in tense matters enormously to your nervous system. Coming implies absence, already here implies fact, and Thanksgiving only does its intended work when it's responding to the second one, even if the second one is for now only true inside your own imagination. This also resolves the separate universe problem from earlier, because thanks given this way isn't directed outward at an external decision maker whose favor you're courting. It's simply the natural feeling tone of someone who already has what they wanted, expressed the same way you'd express it to no one in particular, the way you might exhale in relief alone in a room with nobody there to perform gratitude for. That's the tell of genuine thanksgiving. It doesn't require an audience, human or cosmic, because it was never a request in the first place. Here's what this sounds like in practice, in exact words, so there's no ambiguity about what to actually say. Instead of "Thank you, universe, for the money that's coming," feel the specific scene first, the calm check of an account, the settled conversation, then simply say, "This is handled," or "That's done," or simply, "Thank you," with nothing else attached. The same clipped certain tone you'd use confirming a fact you already knew. Instead of "I'm so grateful abundance is flowing to me," which still implies a future flow rather than a present fact, try, "I have what I need," said flatly once, the way you'd state your own name. Instead of a long, effortful paragraph of gratitude, written every morning hoping today's the day it works, a single brief quiet acknowledgement said once from inside the felt scene holds more actual weight than an entire page written from outside it. Notice what all of these have in common: brevity, present tense, and an almost boring lack of drama. None of them are trying to convince anyone of anything, including you. They're simply naming what's already been assumed as settled, the exact tone you'd use for something so obviously true it doesn't need embellishing. Here's the objection I already know is coming. My gratitude practice made me feel better, genuinely, even if nothing external had changed yet, so how can it be doing damage? Feeling better is real, and I'm not disputing that a gratitude practice can genuinely lift a mood, but feeling better and shifting an assumed identity are two different events, and conflating them is exactly why this practice quietly stalls out for so many people for months or years at a time. Our mood is temporary, generated by momentarily focusing on something pleasant instead of something stressful. It fades within minutes or hours, and it doesn't require your nervous system to log a new, specific sensory scene as evidence of a changed identity. It's genuinely pleasant and genuinely insufficient on its own. An assumed identity, the kind that actually outpictures into new circumstances, requires the specific mechanism we've covered across this channel repeatedly: a vivid, sensory, felt scene, repeated, entered from a relaxed state, treated as fact rather than hope. Gratitude can be the closing note of that process. It was never designed to be the entire process by itself. Feeling better is a pleasant side effect of the version most people are practicing. It is not the same thing as the identity shift they actually came here looking for, and confusing the two is precisely why so many sincere, consistent gratitude practitioners stay financially exactly where they started, feeling slightly better about it the entire time. There's a reason this shallow version of gratitude is the version that got popularized across social media instead of the deeper mechanism Neville actually taught. It's easy content. Anyone can film themselves saying they're grateful for abundance. It requires no explanation of assumption, no discussion of the nervous system, no uncomfortable conversation about begging disguised as thanks. It's warm, it's palatable, it photographs well against a sunrise, and it asks absolutely nothing difficult of the person consuming it. Teaching the actual mechanism, identity first, specific scenes, relaxed states, thanksgiving as confirmation rather than request, takes longer to explain and asks people to do something less immediately comfortable than journaling 3 things they're thankful for before bed. This is not a small industry mistake. It's a profitable one, because a practice that feels productive without requiring real change keeps people coming back, buying the next journal, the next course, the next affirmation deck, still thanking the same separate universe for money that still hasn't arrived, still feeling like they're doing the work without ever being told that the specific version they were taught was built for engagement, not for results. There's one more layer to this worth naming, because it's part of why this particular sentence has survived unquestioned for so long. Question gratitude culture publicly, even gently, even with a mechanism as clearly explained as the one in this video, and you'll often get accused of negativity, of low vibration, of not understanding how grateful you should be. That reaction is worth noticing for what it actually is: a social mechanism that discourages exactly the kind of honest examination we've just done, by making the examiner feel ungrateful for even asking the question. This is precisely the effect that keeps a weak technique in circulation long after it should have been refined or replaced. Nobody wants to be the person publicly questioning gratitude. It sounds petty, even mean-spirited. which means the actual mechanism underneath the practice rarely gets examined by the people teaching it or the people practicing it. It gets defended reflexively on vibes, the same vibes this channel has never had much patience for. You're allowed to genuinely value gratitude as a state and still ask honestly whether the specific way you were taught to perform it is doing what you were told it does. Those aren't contradictory positions, no matter how many comment sections insist otherwise. Once you actually start using Thanksgiving this way, confirming a felt scene instead of requesting an outcome, there's a specific, recognizable shift that tends to show up before any external number changes. The daily anxious checking starts to quiet down on its own, not through effort or suppression, simply because there's less underneath it that still needs checking. Gratitude stops feeling like a task on a list, 3 things I'm thankful for, and starts feeling like an occasional, brief, almost unremarkable response to a state that already feels settled. You'll notice you're saying it less often, not more. And what you do say carries a flatter, more certain tone, closer to stating a fact than performing an emotion. This is usually the opposite of what people expect, since most manifestation content implies more gratitude, more repetition, more daily ritual equals more results. The actual shift tends to move the other direction. Less need to say it, because there's less unsettled lack underneath prompting the performance in the first place. If you notice yourself needing the ritual less and feeling calmer rather than anxious about that reduction, that's a far more reliable signal that something has actually shifted than any streak of consecutive journal entries could ever be. The outer number, the actual bank balance, remains the slowest part of this entire sequence to move, exactly as it should, since it was never the leading indicator to begin with, just the last domino, waiting, as always, for the assumption to settle first. Notice your own reaction to this video so far specifically. If some part of you felt defensive, caught, maybe slightly annoyed at having a comforting daily practice, examine this closely. Sit with that reaction for a moment, instead of dismissing it. Defensiveness about a technique usually shows up strongest exactly where the technique has been doing the least, because admitting it might not be working means admitting months or years of sincere effort didn't move the needle the way it was supposed to. That's an uncomfortable thing to sit with, and the discomfort itself is useful information, not a reason to close this video and go back to the version that felt easier to perform. Force yourself to notice the difference. Today, the next time gratitude comes out of your mouth or your journal, between a thanks that's confirming something already assumed and a thanks that's quietly begging in warmer language. Dictate thanksgiving from the position of the scene already being true, instead of performing it from the position of still waiting to find out. Destroy the habit of thanking a separate universe as though it's an external authority whose favor must be earned. There is no separate authority. There is only the state you're currently assuming, projected outward and experienced as if it came from somewhere else. Starve the repetition, the grasping, the 5 morning affirmations that all quietly function as 5 requests, and replace them with one brief, settled thanks given from inside a scene you've actually occupied first. Brainwash yourself out of the version of gratitude that photographs well and produces nothing, and into the version that looks, from the outside, almost identical and produces everything, because the only thing that ever separated the two was the state underneath the words the exact thing. Nobody selling you a gratitude journal was ever going to explain. That single repositioned sentence, "Thank you, universe," for something you don't yet have, may genuinely be the most expensive sentence available to you, not because of what it costs to say, but because of how many months of your life it can quietly consume while feeling the entire time like exactly the right thing to be doing. Comment one gratitude phrase you're going to stop saying from lack starting today, and the one specific scene you're going to feel it from instead.